Welcome to People Love Process. Adobe Illustrator is industry standard for creating vector-based artwork. But at times, vector-based design can be a little too clean, too perfect. And that's where I turn to using textures in order to give a design an authentic, distressed aesthetic. I like to say that textures bring humanity to vector art. So in this movie, I'll show you several examples of using Illustrator as a staging ground for composing a texture-rich design using several different methods. But before we jump into Illustrator, I first want to show you how to create your own texture resources using Photoshop. So that's where we're going to start with this process. So let's dive into it. So we're inside of Photoshop, and you can see this texture here. Now, this isn't a derived texture from a real-world surface. This was created just using a rubber roller and some ink on a textured paper stock to get the texturing here. And you can see it's not perfect, and that all the artifacts are on the inside of this is what we want to capture and use. And so it's very simple. We can just simply go to let's see, we'll go up to image, we'll go to adjust, and we'll just go to invert. And you can see we're going to turn everything that was just the black background into these areas here. This is where I'll grab like the pencil tool. I might make it a little bigger, kind of like this. And then I'll just paint out the areas I don't want like this. So we don't even need a lot of this on the perimeter. You know, we're just interested in all the artifacts in the middle, like that. Now, I have a friend who's a Photoshop pro. His name's Jesus Ramirez, and he runs his own website where he does Photoshop tutorials. He's amazing, but anybody can do this level of Photoshop. Now, I just did that really quick and dirty. This was how I actually inverted everything. And all we have to do in this case is isolate a specific one of these textures and turn it into what I call a spot texture. So it's at this point I would save a layered file, a layered PSD file. And then I would go ahead and isolate an area. Maybe it's this texture right here. And then I would go ahead and just crop it, because this is all we need is just this one little texture here. And in this case, we can even go to flatten image like this. It's okay to get rid of those layers. Then I just go in on this. Once again, you could use the pencil tool. You could use whatever you want. And I would just get rid of all the really fine artifacts that we don't need. Don't want to get rid of all of them, because that's what makes a texture cool, is all those artifacts. But all these wouldn't really show anyway, based off of the size we're going to be using this. So like that. Once I had this, then that's where I would save it. Right now it's a grayscale. I would save it as a bitmap TIFF, and then put it to use by placing it into Illustrator. And I'm going to walk through that a little later. So this is how I'd make what I call a spot texture. Spot texture, because I'm going to show you how I use those. It's kind of crazy, but it works really well and gives a really cool look. The other way to create your own texture resource is obviously to take a nice photo of a thrash background. In this case, this was painted metal, and it was on the side. I believe it was like a what do you call it? A bulldozer. And this was part of the graphics. The base of the vehicle was this kind of golden yellow, and then it had some graphics on it. But over the years, as it was used in, I'm assuming, like construction and that type of situation, and the weather, it just wore out and got scrapes and scratches on it, but it creates a really cool texture. So this is what we're going to create. One of the resources I'm going to show you in later on in this movie of how we put it to use. I want to show you how I create it. It's really easy. It starts with the real-world surface photograph like this. The larger the resolution, the better. Obviously, we're in RGB mode. And all I'm going to do is, the first thing I want to do is, I find it's easier to adjust if you're working with a black and white image. So I'm going to go down here to effects, and my bad, go to this one. and we're going to go to black and white. So I just want to turn it into a black and white image. Once I have that, I can go back to effects, and I just want to blow this out. So I'm going to do that using levels, and this will give me the controls to pull stuff around and make it look the way I want. Now, right now, this is a little too gray, too faint. We want to improve the contrast, so I'm going to bring the left over quite a bit. You know, I want it to be somewhat dark, so I think that works. And then from the right, I'll pull this over as well. And something like about that. And then in the mid-range is where you'll decide how much artifacting. Anything gray is going to kind of break up into little artifacts. So we could keep it as is, or we can adjust it. I think I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Something like, I don't know, something like that. I think that works. And this is the point I would then go to mode, and I'd save out. I'd go back to grayscale since we're in RGB. Then I'd go to bitmap, and I'll walk you through that in just a second. But I want to show you another layer, because this same texture I'm going to use multiple times. I'm going to use it as is like this and save it out as what's called a dithered bitmap, and you're going to see what that is in just a little bit. But I also blew it out even more. So if I turn on this layer, you can see it just leaves elements without any of that inner detail. And so I blow this out quite a bit. I would go in here, and you could even adjust this further if you wanted to. So we could go up here. If I pull it this way, you can see some of that gray starts coming in again. Or I can just blow it out even more and get rid of more of it. So I do that because I'll then use this in combination with another image I have based off of the other adjustments I made. And then when we compose it, it looks far more authentic. So let's go back to this one, because I want to show you what a bitmap dither is. So we're going to go to image. Right now we're in RGB. So we're going to go to grayscale. It'll say changing modes. We'll discard the layers. That's fine. And in this case, we can just flatten, because I have this saved as a PSD. So I can always go back to my source file later if I want to. So now it's a flattened grayscale. We're going to go to mode. We're going to go to bitmap. Now this is where you have to make some decisions. Right now it's at 800 pixels per inch. We don't want 50% threshold. I use that at times for certain types of textures, but for this one, we're going to go to diffusion dither. This is going to create almost like a stochastic dot, and it reduces the image down to just black pixels and white pixels. And anything white, when we bring it into Adobe Illustrator, will be transparent by default. So this is way too dense. So we're going to try 85 pixels per inch diffusion dither, and we're going to click OK. Let's go ahead and zoom in. You can see that's all it's done, is it's created a nice dither. And I think this one's a little too coarse, so this is where I'll step back, Command Z. I'll go back to my original image. I'll go back to bitmap, and now I think we want a little more detail, so I'm going to go 100 and click OK. And I think that just looks a little better, just a little more fine detail. And I think for the size, in this case, a sign we're going to be creating, I think this is going to work great. And so I would save this out. Once again, I would just go save, and I'd save this as a bitmap TIFF image. So let's go ahead and switch over to Illustrator, because I'm going to show you how I put these to use. Okay, we're in Illustrator now, and this first image I wanted to show you, because you might have wondered, how did I even start doing this kind of texturing? Well, I went to art school, and this is going to date me saying this, but the year was around 1986, and I was just getting ready to graduate from art school, but I had a photography class. And keep in mind, this was pre-digital. We were using SLR cameras, but we were shooting on film. And then we had to get a contact sheet made so we can see all the prints. And then we could pick what print we wanted to do larger. So it was, the methodology was not as easy as it is now. So, but our assignment one time, I went to art school in Seattle, by the way, and our assignment by the teacher, who was a photographer, was to shoot Seattle, go around Seattle and shoot it. I took a little bit of liberty with that. I was on my way to the art store in downtown Seattle, and I walked by this abandoned hotel, and it was all boarded up, and it had signs, no trespassing. And it intrigued me. And I don't know if I'd do this today, but back then I was young and stupid and just thought, hey, it'd be fun. I climbed over the barricade they had around the building, and I went into this old abandoned hotel, and it was decaying, and there was cracks everywhere and chipped paint. And I actually laid on the floor and took this photo just because I thought it looked cool with the lighting. This is where my fascination with textures began. But it was only once digital came on the scene that I could take some of my archive I had already built that was in analog, and then I started adding to it and creating digital myself. I even published a book in 2006 called Crumble, Crackle, and Burn, which is all about using textures in design. And so I just wanted to share that with you because this is why I like textures. So textures, I want to show you a couple different ways you can do it using Illustrator. So if you have a design you're doing for a t-shirt, let's say it's a creative samurai like this character, and you want to have this printed on your shirt, but you don't want it to be so stark, so clean and perfect, which is vector art. And that's the whole reason vector art is used in the context of branding, because it's resolution independent. You could scale it as large as you want. It'll look as good as it does on a postage stamp level. So all we're going to do is we're going to place a bitmap TIFF image. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. We'll go up here and, well, that's interesting. My place command is grayed out, probably because I'm not on the layer. There we go. Let's hit that again. We'll select the surface texture and we'll go place. And when you do that, wherever you click first, that'll be the top left of the image you're placing. You can see a little thumbnail what this looks like. And we want to scale it, and we'll start by placing it here. I'll move this over, and we're just going to scale this down because it's just a bit too big, like this. Might even scale it down a bit like that. And I might move it over a bit. And in this case, if we just color it the same color as the background, you can see it creates a really nice, authentic looking distress to this graphic. So it could be as easy as doing this. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but that's just a TIFF image sitting on top. How would you set this up for screen print? Well, that's what I want to show you next. And I want to show you an extreme example of that. So you saw in Photoshop how we took this, this kind of ink rolled texture that we created, and then we inversed it, and we got all the little artifacts on the inside, and then we isolated this specific shape, and then I saved this out as a bitmap TIFF image. And so if I turn on this layer here, you can see here's the bitmap spot texture that we have here. This is just a regular vector object, but here's other ones derived from the same pattern. Well, the nice thing is let's say you could color this white and you could move it over like this and just place it on the edge here, maybe on this one. We do that white as well, bring it over here. Maybe this eats up the middle part. You could even go to transparency if you don't want it to be 100% and like knock it down 70. Maybe this one comes up at the bottom, and again, it can eat away that edge. You could use this methodology not just in Illustrator if you're laying something out graphic-wise. You could use it in InDesign to do the same thing. I've actually used pings in print files, and it freaks the pre-press people out. You can't use a ping. Yeah, you can. In this case, you could. It doesn't matter. It's not a printable color. It's just there to create an effect. And they freak out because a ping's RGB, and if you're printing CMYK, they'll argue you can't do that. Yet I've done it all the time with print projects. So just a little insight there. So these are pretty cool. But specifically, if you're doing a t-shirt design, this won't cut it. you wouldn't want to send them a file like this because it'd never come out correct. So let's go ahead and address that. And this is the design that's just simple, clean vector artwork again that we have placed here like this. And all we're going to do is we're going to use the spot textures to really kind of add some nice, intriguing characteristics to this artwork, some authentic distress to it, that is. So let's turn on this level, and you can see how it goes from clean to really kind of distressed. So what's going on here? Well, let me turn off, let me go to keyline view or outline mode, which is Command Y. And you can see all of these, let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. You can see all these place textures that I have just sitting on top of this image. And when I do that, this is what it'll look like. So it's a pretty messy file, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how to keep messing it up in a way. We're going to take this texture, which is something that I cut off another ink brush texture that I had. A friend of mine who's an illustrator did some children's books, and he did all these really cool roller textures. And I was just commenting on how cool his textures were, and he sent them to me, and I've been using them ever since. So this is derived from one of those that he sent me. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to compose this with my design and just bring it down here, because what I want to create is the effect that it's eaten away the edge here. And so all we're going to do is color it the same color as the background, and you can see that's the effect we're getting. Now, obviously, once again, this isn't how it's going to work when we send the final art, but this is the process I use to do that. So what are we going to do to make this a file we can send to a creative director? Well, that's where the next step comes in. All I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off our design layer and turn off the background layer. So you see we have all these. Let's go ahead and just zoom out a little bit so you can see what's going on. I'm going to Command A. So all of these are in the place I want, aligned with my artwork, but they're all independent place spot textures. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up to Object. I'm going to go down to Rasterize. I'm going to click on it. It's going to give me some options here. I'm going to choose Grayscale. And instead of 300, which would probably work, we're going to go to Other, because I want to show you can do this at any resolution. And you might be thinking, yeah, but those images might be at a certain resolution. You know what? Doesn't matter. They're textures. So if it degrades it a little more, it's just going to look good. That's the most forgiving part about textures. So we're going to punch in 400 ppi. We'll keep it white. And then everything else we'll just leave as is showing here. And I'm going to click OK. And boom. This is now, if I go to keyline view or outline mode, you can see it's just one, in this case, embedded image. So we're going to go to Window, and we're going to go up and open Image Trace. We're going to bring that over here. And we'll click on Advance because we want to control it. We're going to trace this really tight. So we'll pull this all the way over to the right, and we'll pull the noise all the way over to the left. And this is important. Click Ignore White. So everywhere that's white in this image, we don't want that to be a vector shape. We just don't want, we want white to be ignored. So the only thing it's image tracing is everything that's black in this raster image. Now that we have that set, we can click Trace. And you can see it traces it. Now to expand it, we just expand it like this. And you have an ungodly amount of anchor points. This is why I never, well, this is the one exception where I will image trace the texture, because if you look at this panel, 185,000 plus anchor points. That's quite a bit of anchor points. And if I go to the appearance panel here, you can see it's a group. I'm going to change this just briefly to a compound path. And just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to color it yellow too. And we're going to turn back on our background so you can see it sitting on the background, and turn on our artwork. All we're going to do now is I'm going to layer select our artwork and layer select the texture, and we're going to go to Pathfinder and we're going to go minus front and click it. Might take a little longer if your machine is a little slower. And boom, let's go ahead and zoom in. We have this, and now if we go to outline mode, you can see this a screen printer could use. Now, as much as I like this, I think it can even be improved. All we did is ate away at the graphic elements that make up this design, but I want more artifacts outside of those because technically those would be there too. So we're going to go back to that texture we created here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to make it more imperfect. We're just going to bring it over right about, I say right about there. Looks good. But I don't like that it's going to eat away part of the lettering. So I'll just click into isolation mode, grab my lasso tool, and I'm just going to lasso these vectors down here and just delete them because I don't need them. Like that. And then I'm going to turn on this layer, and you can see all these other vector-based images. So we'll select that, select the original yellow we brought over, select the image we had in the background, and I'm going to go ahead and actually, I should remember to do this. Let's check the appearance panel. Yeah, once we minus front everything, it turned in a group. We're going to change that back to a compound. Then if I go in here, you can see this is a compound, and you can see this is a compound. So I always find it's easier. You want to make sure that everything that you're going to unite together with Pathfinder now is a compound. So we'll hit unite. And then if we go back to appearance, you can see it's a group still. You could leave it as a group at this point, but I always tend to turn it into a compound. And then we're going to fill it with white again. And now we have, if we go back to our outline mode, a complete graphic that's vector-based that you could send to a screen printer. It's going to work great for doing T-shirts, and it has a very authentic kind of aesthetic to it. And that's because it was derived from real-world textures. So that's how you can do it. That's one way. So if I was doing that Creative Samurai again, I would use the same process to set up the final art that I'd send to the client. Let's take a look at another type of project. This isn't T-shirts. So I had a client who is a craft brewer. This isn't the specific design, but the methodology is identical. And they wanted to get these tin signs printed. And I go, oh, this is going to be fun. So here's the texture we created in Photoshop with the 100 dither setting. And all we're going to do here is we're going to color this white. We'll go down to transparency. I'm going to set this for 30% like that. And then I'm going to turn on this layer. This is derived from the exact same Photoshop file I showed you, but I just blew out everything or cloned out everything I didn't want, but it aligns with the underlying texture. We just colored white and adjusted the transparency, and you can see it already starts to have some authentic distress because it aligns with everything underneath it. So I'm going to make a mask of the sign itself, and then I can just go ahead and select both the TIFFs plus the mask, and then I'm going to mask it. And I have a F key, F1 set up as a keyboard shortcut to mask. Otherwise, you'd have to go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And notice I have F1, so I never do that. I just select, hit F1. Everything's masked now. So if I turn off the mask layer, everything's masked within that shape. The design for this, we're sandwiching in between the textures we just placed on top of the surface of the sign itself. And now we're going to reuse that exact same texture we created in Photoshop. But in this case, instead of it being white, we've colored it the same color as the base color. And I just adjusted the transparency to 25%. Actually, looking at this, I'll probably take off 5. Let's go down to 20. because this is only going to flow through the areas of the white of the graphic itself. So I want that to be imperfect. I don't want that to be just flat white. It just wouldn't look right. So that's why we did that. And now the next thing we're going to do is we'll turn on this layer. And once again, this is a blowout of the exact same texture. But notice how it gives a nice distressed look, as if it scraped the side of the sign on something and it just marred the surface of the lettering. So I think that's going to work well. We'll just go ahead and select the mask, and we'll select this TIFF and this TIFF, and we'll go ahead again, mask it within this mask, which is made from the design itself. So let's go ahead and do that. It'll give you this warning in Illustrator. I wish there was a checkbox where it just said, just ignore it. I've used this long enough to know this isn't going to cause problems. I don't know why it keeps saying that. And this is what the final art looked like. Now, this looked so cool. The sign I did for the craft brewery, because every part of the design that's hot rod or the culture of custom, all those areas were embossed. So it had an authentic distress, but it was embossed as well, and it was printed on tin. Now, if you're interested in checking out how you could do the same thing, this is the vendor. It's brewerybranding.com. They do a lot of stuff for independent brewers, and you can see, oops, let's go ahead and turn these layers off. You can see here, they do custom die cut on signs, or you can do circular shapes. We did the one that falls within this category, which was just the square, and I just turned it into a diamond instead. So a lot of things you could do with this. It's a whole lot of fun to create with it as well. Now, I've been using textures since art school, which required pre-digital methods like film and processing prints. The digital methods today are much easier and allow anyone to create their own textures and collate an ever-growing texture library as well. Now, to help you out in the exercise files, which you can access through the description below this movie, includes a small texture set. So you can immediately start using those and see what you can create with them. I encourage you to go texture exploring, though. Distressed surfaces are everywhere. The best part about textures is they are a resource you can use for a lifetime of creativity, because the second nature, or the second law of thermodynamics, that is, never goes out of style. It's timeless. If you like this movie, please consider sharing a link to my YouTube channel and social media. I'd really, really appreciate that. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe as well, so you know when the next movie is released. Thank you for watching People of Process. I hope this content helps you improve your own creative process.